Hi everyone, how are you doing? Today we are going to draw something really fun, but before I reveal what I've drawn, it needs a little bit of a backstory. It's a request from one of my viewers, and I'm quite a bit embarrassed about it because it's a request from almost a year ago and I procrastinated enormously with this one. The person requested me to draw a charging rhino. But I couldn't find good reference pictures that I could use, and I kept on procrastinating because I was afraid I would mess it up. But I really wanted to do this one because Jurgen, the person who asked me to, have been supporting me even since before my YouTube channel, and I really appreciate that. So now it's finished, and what did I draw? Brace yourself. I've drawn this. I took my own spin on it. I made a rhino charging his energy on the couch. The reference I've used is a composite I've made in Photoshop from a few photographs. The original photo is from Pixabay. Without further ado, I do know how much you like nail polish. So Jurgen, if you watch this, deze is voor jou. The very beginning of an illustration is always the hardest. You have a large, white, pristine piece of paper in front of you and you have to start drawing on it with a permanent pen. In my case, also a technique that I haven't practiced much yet, so it was an extra challenge. But in most cases, you just have to start somewhere and then you'll see where you end up. In order to see the details better, I have enlarged a part of the reference both for myself and for you, and place it next to the drawing. Unless it's a portrait of a specific person or pet it needs to look like, perfection isn't important. In fact, especially with a medium like pen and ink, it's impossible to get every detail exactly the same. What is especially important is that you know how to convey the right contrast, the values between light and dark. Some parts of the drawing were quite tricky and required extreme concentration for my part. So it's important that you keep looking back and forward from your reference to your drawing and take regular breaks. That prevents you from getting lost in the details. I wasn't necessarily trying to exactly copy every wrinkle on the rhino's face, but to imitate the texture. The skin of the rhinoceros is not the same all over its face. In addition to wrinkles that run horizontally, you also see vertical lines, and one area of the face is smoother than the other. Also keep in mind that wrinkles are not just superficial lines, but three-dimensional, so every wrinkle has its own shadow and highlight. The wrinkles on the back of his head and in the rhino's neck are a lot smaller and denser than on his nose. They almost look like scales. I try to imitate that effect by drawing tiny half circles. Even the white of the blouse is not completely white. You can see shadows from the folds in the clothes, and even if you have a black pen, you want to add some texture. Sometimes a line can look a bit harsh in the lighter area. In that case, you can make use of broken lines. In dark areas, place more marks closer together, and in lighter areas, you leave more space between your marks. Or in some cases you can leave a piece of the paper completely blank. pen you communicate not only the contrast, but also the shape of an object. Try to bend your lines across the shape of the object. There are more roads that lead to Rome, also with drawing. Even if you use a certain style or technique, like I use crosshatching here, you can do things in several ways. Look for the way that suits you the best. It's fine to see the hand of the artist in the artwork. Try to notice the small details, such as subtle shades of light. The creases in the suit also capture light and, like the wrinkles on his face, have their own shadow and highlight. If you can convey that in your drawing, you get depth in your illustration. Shoes were quite tricky, because the details of the reference blended into the background a bit. In a drawing like this, with tricky details, it is the best to tackle the things one by one. First do the details that you can see well, and that you don't worry too much about. This way you build confidence, and once you get to a difficult part, you will see that it's easier than you initially thought. If areas are very similar in contrast, they can blend into each other in your drawing. In that case, you can try to keep the parts separated from each other by leaving a thin edge of white, or just make it a little bit darker, even if it's not necessarily clearly present in your reference photo. I try to imitate the woven texture of the sofa by placing my marks perpendicular to each other, with broken lines here and there. I take the shape of the sofa into account part of the shadow to the left of the rhinoceros, and a bit of sunlight that shines through the window on the armrest. In the shadow part, I put the marks a bit closer together and in the light part further apart. You will see that if you add lighting, your drawing gets more dimension, even if it seems a bit strange at first. But when the drawing is finished and the details have more context, everything comes together and your brain processes all the information as a whole. In the reference photo, the bottom of the floor molding continues in line with the bottom of the sofa. That kind of detail can be disturbing or confusing in both photographs and illustration. That's why I choose to draw the molding a little bit higher to create a clear difference between the wall and the sofa. As for the lampshade, I wasn't sure if I wanted to run the lines horizontally or vertically. I had to write both options on a piece of paper first. In the end I thought horizontal stripes looked the best, also because of the contrast with the ribs in the lampshades that run vertically. Just like with the lampshade, I could run the lines in both the length and the width on the side table. Because the table is quite dark, you can quickly lose depth when all the surfaces start to merge into each other. But by allowing the lines in another plane to run in a different direction, you maintain that contrast. The floor is also quite dark. I wanted to apply wood texture to the planks. By not losing the gaps between the planks, I draw them with a slightly thicker pen. You don't see an obvious wood pattern in the floor in the reference photo, but sometimes you have to add things to convey the right story to the viewer. I deliberately made the lines of the rug a bit wobbly to show that it's not a stiff, hard surface, but a flexible, soft carpet. Before I apply the shadow to the floor, I first map it out with a pencil. This prevents you from getting a crooked shadow. I was a bit worried about the wall. The wall in the reference has a very rough texture and I didn't want the rhinoceros and the sofa to get lost in the jumble of scribbles. After drawing the frames, I went looking for wallpaper inspiration on Pinterest. I scanned my drawing on the computer and started to trying out different designs in Photoshop. This resulted in two options that I try out on a piece of paper. In the end I went for the diamond-shaped pattern. That gave a nice and playful contrast and a real feeling of wallpaper. I first had to draw guidelines for it with a pencil, but despite the guidelines, this was not very easy to do for me. The repeating pattern really messed with my brain and I had to maintain utmost concentration to avoid making mistakes. But looking all over the wallpaper, I made only 2 mistakes. Luckily I had white ink to correct the mistakes, and unless you know where they are, you can't see it in the final result. After I had completely drawn the pattern on the wall and the ink had dried sufficiently, I erased the guidelines. Suddenly I felt that something was missing. The wall was too plain for my opinion. I thought it was because I'd been staring at the guidelines for so long that I'd gotten used to them. But I took a break to distance myself from my work, and when I got back to my drawing after a while, I still thought the wall was too bare and needed the guidelines. Of course the pen is darker than my pencil, so I used broken marks to keep the diamond shapes as the focal point of the wallpaper. Then it was finally time for the photo frames. I wasn't sure what I wanted to put in the picture frames, so I scanned my drawing once again to try out some different options in Photoshop. I thought it would be a nice idea to draw more animal portraits in it, but that distracted too much from the rhinoceros. In the end I went for some botanical prints. People sometimes have flowers on the wall, so why not rhinos? I chose not to draw anything in the frame at the top, because you probably won't notice it anyway, and when I frame the drawing, a small edge is cut off. So any squiggle that is still visible becomes an annoying focal point and you don't want that. After the photo frames, the drawing wasn't ready yet. The wall still needed shadow. I made a diamond pattern in the shadow area with a slightly thicker pen and added a few extra horizontal hatch marks. Then I had to wait for the ink to dry completely before I started erasing and cutting out the illustration. All in all, I'm very happy with the end result. It took me a whole week to make the drawing. Jurgen, it probably wasn't what you had in mind when you asked me to draw a charging rhino, but I hope you're happy with it anyway. I definitely want to make more of these types of illustrations. So if you don't want to miss out on those drawings, subscribe to my channel and leave a message below this video. Have a nice day, until next time.